What do most Fortune 500 executives have in common? They learned important lessons on the fields and courts of their high school and collegiate sports teams. This is true for both men and women. Ernst & Young found that a whopping 94% of women holding a C-suite position played sports. Their wins and losses shaped their habits and who they would become. Join me on my journey to sit with some of the brightest executives in the world as we discuss how sports shape their professional trajectory. In partnership with Chief Executive Magazine, the voice of America's CEO community. I'm your host, Don Yeager, and this is Corporate Competitor Podcast. With me for today's episode is the Kingdom Business Leaders Executive Director, Steve Dulin. Steve grew up in Texas playing football, basketball, and golf. He went on to Rice University to pursue gridiron glory, but was injured, ending that dream. After graduating from Rice, he started Milestone Construction. In his 20 years as owner and president, Milestone completed more than 2,500 projects and never missed a deadline and never came in over budget. Now, for all of us who've ever been in business and have ever hired a construction company, let me say that again. They never missed a deadline and never came in over budget. Today, he's going to share his journey and how he accomplished this incredible feat. I have my notepad ready, and I hope you do too.
I love the strategy of playing defense. I didn't make my money in my company doing construction. I made my living reading people. Can you read the quarterback? What's he going to do? Can you read the offense? Can you read the tight end? Is he going out for a pass? Is he staying in the block?
Steve, thanks for joining us.
Hey, Don, thank you so much for having me. It's such a blessing, such an honor to be with you. I love what you're doing, and I'm really excited about joining you today. Thank you so much for having me.
You know, and I've enjoyed our relationship, our time, our growth as friends and as colleagues over time. And I have loved your story. So take me back to your childhood, Greenville, Texas. You have twin brothers, and I know they're just a year older than you, but you have this entrepreneurial spirit. You didn't just have a paper route. You had a lawn company. You had a fence company. You had a hay hauling business. Do you have a sense of where that entrepreneurial spirit sprouted from?
You know, that's such a great question. My dad was an engineer. He was in the aerospace industry, so he wasn't entrepreneurial. My mom wasn't. Part of it came from my personality, you know, kind of a high D, type A, but also because of my brothers, great athletes. They ran track and cross country in high school. They played all kinds of sports. We were always competing. And then you kind of look to the business world and realize you want to compete in the business world. And then you want to get to the highest place in the business world, which to me was running a company. And so I think part of it was just honestly competition with my brothers and others, and then realizing that there's this great analogy to the business world where everyone's competing. I love the competition and thought when I get to the business world, I want to compete there as well, but I also want to compete on kind of my own terms and always wanted to lead a company. And so I just flowed out of that competition, I think.
If you want to lead your own company as a young person, start a lawn company. You will be the only one in it, so you're the leader. But I know athletics were also really important. As you said, your brothers were athletes. You played football, basketball, golf, baseball. You did it all.
Yeah.
Tell me the role that athletics played in those formative years.
Back then, Don, of course, we're kind of the same era. During the summer, you just leave the house, 8 o'clock in the morning, and you just go play baseball all day or football or basketball. We had this big field out behind our house. So I went and got cans and sticks and stuck them in the ground and then got a little baseball club and charged the neighboring kids in the neighborhood, I don't know, a nickel to play my golf course. The farmer kept it mowed. And so if you want to play my golf course, it was a nickel or a dime or whatever it was. So we were always doing that, always playing sports. I always had a team with my brothers, right? We always could find another kid or multiple kids and start a game up. But the other thing was my parents were always there at every game I ever played, all the way through high school. And since my brothers and I are less than a year apart, we often were on the same team. We would play together, and my dad was our coach for many, many years. And my dad was really a great coach. Actually, we never lost. We won every championship we ever played together as brothers. except for our last championship, which was in sixth grade. It was in the summer. My brothers went to scout camp to help get their Eagle Scout badge. And I stayed and played, and we lost the championship game in baseball by 1 run. It was the only season we ever played together that we didn't win the championship. And then that was my dad's last season, by the way, as a coach.
Right.
He's like, well, good time to retire. So, but my dad was always there. He was an assistant scoutmaster. My mom came to every game. So it was a big part of our family. Our family kind of revolved around sports.
As you went on to Denton High School, your team was pretty incredible. 8-2-1 senior year and won the district title, and you were named all district. What do you remember about that senior season? Your brothers were gone by then, but what do you remember about that year and your individual accomplishment and team accomplishment?
The funny thing is we lost 2 games that year. Both games we lost at the time, the team we lost to was the #1 ranked team in the state. And so we ended up being actually ranked #4 in the state. What I really remember was the camaraderie, the culture of the team, and the way we all pulled together. We all worked together, the work ethic. Individually, in our championship game for our district championship, I was playing wide receiver, and I went downfield and made 2 blocks that sprang our tailback, and we actually scored 2 touchdowns on those 2 blocks. I could catch the ball and all that, and I could get open, but very few wide receivers will block downfield really well. I love blocking downfield. And that was actually the film that the coaches would send out to different colleges, the film of me making these 2 blocks.
No kidding.
Yeah, I mean, obviously they showed me catching passes as well, but I think it's so valuable to block downfield because you never know when a running back's going to spring a touchdown. So I was always very diligent about my technique of blocking people downfield, and literally 2 touchdowns in the district championship game. I always requested when you send the film out, make sure that's in there. Of course they did.
It's the willingness to do the dirty work, which most people don't want to do.
That's exactly right. And that just so translates into business. Who's willing to get down into the details and who's willing to do the dirty work and think about what's really going to help the team win? It's a great translation into the business world.
I know that as a junior, you played linebacker, or senior, you were wide receiver, offense, defense. What was your preference?
You know, I loved them both. I actually like defense a little bit better. I love the strategy of playing defense. How do I get leverage on the offensive tackle or the tight end? How do I read the quarterback? I didn't make my money in my company doing construction. I made my living reading people. Can you read the quarterback? What's he going to do? Can you read the offense? Can you read the tight end? Is he going out for a pass? Is he staying in the block? So I actually love the strategy of defense better. And of course, I love the hitting, but you could hit either way. So.
Well, obviously, if you're blocking as a wide receiver, you're hitting, you're good at that.
Exactly.
But no, you're exactly right. And so much of that too comes with preparation. When you're watching game film, what kind of habits are you looking for in an opponent? What are their tendencies? And it's so funny because, again, enough people have seen Friday Night Lights to appreciate how big Texas high school football is. Some of the schools down there in Texas that are small college programs really is what they are.
Exactly. Of course, when we lost in the regional championship game, it was to Odessa Permian, who was the feature of Friday Night Lights. So all the Friday Night Lights kicks that came out of that program, they were ranked #1 in the state at the time we played them, and we lost in a very windy game out in West Texas.
I love it. And there's so many great applications, as you said, straight from those courts and fields right into what you would grow and do through an enormously successful business career that I can't wait to get to. I want to throw a couple of names at you. And I know these are names you might not have thought about in a few years, but I love digging into them. At Denton, you played for some pretty successful coaches. Head coach Bill Shipman was in 1978 the district coach of the year. His assistant coach, Jim Bateman, went on to become one of the most successful coaches in the program's history. Is there something you learned from either one of those great coaches, a lesson, a leadership trait that you continue to hold on to today?
What I learned from Coach Shipman was the ability to stay calm under pressure. No matter what the situation was, he never changed. You could tell he was thinking through it logically. How do we deal with what we're dealing with right now? This pressure, this issue, this situation in the game. He was always calm. You know, you hear these people say, if you can keep your head when everyone else is losing theirs, you can really become successful.
Right.
And he was incredible about remaining calm under pressure and getting people to calm down and think through the problem. I actually had another coach who was the receivers coach. What he taught me was the value of hard work. And, you know, we called it the board. I think it's called the Oklahoma drill. but we would just line up and hit each other. And then we would go down to the offensive lineman and we would block each other and try and fight through blocks. Practice was so hard that when you got to the game, it was easy. We actually had a couple guys all state, when you blocked him or you try to get past him, man, the game's easy at that point.
Right.
One of the things I took in the business world was, how do I train people to have a great work ethic, but make it where they're like Navy SEALs, where they're so trained that they're able really to overcome any situation. And then he would, I mean, what's pretty rare today, except at the very top flight college programs, is receivers running very precise routes. If you run a really good route, you've got a really good chance to get open. And Coach Garden would drill us on routes. You know, if he wanted you to turn at 10 and a half yards, it wasn't 10 yards, it wasn't 11 yards. You turned at 10 and a half yards for a hook or something. He was so precise. He would just go through and explain things very detailed. A lot of people don't want to get into the details, but the big pictures are made up of little details. But he was an amazing coach because he was so good at training you so that when you got into real life situations, you just knew what to do. And I really carried that ethos also into our company, where we had a very robust training program, but we didn't make it easy. Sometimes you'll have a more difficult situation in our boardroom of answering questions and defending your strategy than you'll ever have out in the real world. And so you're just trained to respond.
So what I loved about listening to you describe both of those there is that you took something from each as you developed your own leadership style.
Yes.
There are too many times we're all saying, gosh, I want to go emulate that person. I want to go be that. The truth is we all are the gumbo of so many of the opportunities we have in our life, and you're taking something from each.
Yes.
So, that's perfect, Steve. Can you show me how maybe a lesson from that coach taught you a lesson that you then applied into your business as you built it?
So we had weekly leadership meetings. We would do Bible studies at our company and talk about character or talk about work ethic or talk about being flexible or whatever it might be. And we would train our employees, give them homework, and then they would come back and share what they learned. You have these values. We would train on values with our employees, and then everyone starts holding each other accountable on the values of the organization. So that was one of the things we've been really great at, is training on values, training on character, and then helping people be held accountable. But employees, staff, they hold each other accountable because they've been trained to do that. The Navy SEALs say, hey, you rise to the level of your training when actual combat happens. So the Navy SEALs, some of the most trained people in the world, it's training that gets you through situations, training on concepts and training on problem solving and training on principles, that when you get into a situation, you're not sure what to do, all that training comes back and you apply the principle or you apply some of the lessons that you've learned.
Steve, I know you had mentioned that over the course of your athletic career, you never actually played for a losing team, but you did suffer losses. What did losing teach you?
I tell you, we lost championship games. We lost games. We lost tournaments. But the person I emulated the most in that was Jack Nicklaus. He was amazing, right? 18 majors in golf, but he came in second in majors 19 times. And I can remember growing up watching him play tournaments, and he was so gracious during a loss, but that you could just also tell he was also thinking like, why did I lose? What will I do better next time? And that's really what I tried to take out of a loss. Why did we lose? Were we not prepared enough? Did we not work together as a team? Was there a weakness that we didn't fill? Was there a player on the other team that we didn't really understand his potential? And did we not strategize for that? And then just learning to lose graciously. At our company, we would tell people, if you're dealing with an owner on a construction project and they ask you to do something and it's really not in the contract, but you finally go, okay, I'll do it. Well, do it gracefully. Don't go, okay, well, I'll just do it, but I don't want to. It's not in a contract. Now you've lost and you made them mad, right? So lose gracefully. Okay, we're happy to do that for you. We're just grateful to be doing a project with you, and lose gracefully. My dad would make sure we lost gracefully. When we lost and if we didn't respond correctly at a younger age, we'd come home, my dad would talk to us about it.
Give me one of those conversations. I got to have it.
I remember a game where one of my teammates, he made a really bad mistake, and I was so mad. It was the last play of the game, actually. It was a baseball. Cost us the game, and I was probably 11, 12 years old, and I just snapped off at him and said some things that never should have said, and my dad was the coach. And so my dad pulled me aside, said, "Son, don't say a word." And then we had our team meeting where, he talked about doing, how we did our best and everything. That's what's important, which is so, so true. And when we got home, My dad said, if that had been the last play of the game, I'd have pulled you off the field. And if you ever do that again or anything like that, then that was our threat. If we did something wrong as kids, the punishment was always, if you do that again, you're going to miss your next game. And we did not want to miss the next game. Really, it was a great athletics in that way. We loved it so much. And my parents did a really great job of training us not to do bad things, because if you do bad things, you have bad endings. It was very effective, very motivational for us.
That's awesome.
I appreciate my dad being willing to do that, because, he's the coach a lot of times, and we might lose the game because I wasn't there. But he taught me that acting properly and doing the right thing was way more important than any game.
Than winning or losing the game. You're right. So after high school, you had the opportunity to go play football at Rice University. Great school. Unfortunately, you'd suffered a neck injury while you were in high school that made your college career short-lived. Can you share a little bit about the injury and how tough it was to give up a sport that meant so much to you?
Whew. I broke my neck in right before my junior year in high school, in the summer, diving into a creek. One of the reasons I moved out to split end, I was actually playing tight end. So I moved out to split end, where I put a double neck roll on and I could still hit people and all that. But when I went to college, they moved me back to tight end. I was much more suited to be a tight end and speed wise and all that. But all that pounding, blocking defensive tackles and defensive ends and things like that just made my neck worse and worse and worse. And finally, I just went to the doctor, a team orthopedic surgeon. And he said, son, you've been playing Russian roulette and you're done.
Mm.
It was the most devastating thing that ever happened to me. So, when things are difficult, God always has a plan. I remember at our company, we'd have this major project that we'd really want. Sometimes we didn't win the project. And I always would think, God has something better for us. Life is something better for us. What is that going to be? And let's focus on that instead of what we lost. Let's focus on what God wants us to have, or what we can win and what we can do to move forward.
But not playing Russian roulette, which is awesome.
And ended up not, with bum knees and all the other things. It was great. So.
Yeah. And then obviously you then ended up throwing yourself into academics and ended up with a triple major. Pretty incredible. And a few years later, the entrepreneurial spirit that had you as a child establishing all those little businesses led you to this incredible company, Milestone Construction. I love the story of Milestone. I love all that I learned about it from you. And in those 20 years that you owned that company, you completed 2,500 projects or more than that. Never had a project miss a deadline or come in over budget, which is just an incredible track record. And for all of us who've ever worked with a construction company, I remember the first time our mutual friend, John Maxwell, told me that story. I thought that is just impossible. Like, those statistics cannot be real. There's no way that happens. It had to be an alternative universe. I'd love to ask you what many of our listeners are asking right now. How did you do that? I mean, how do you build a company that can establish that kind of record of sustained excellence?
Yeah, we were just incredibly blessed, number one. But really what happened is I don't necessarily think it came from sports, but I ended up having some major back problems one year. So I went to the doctor and they put me in bed for several months. So I ran the business from my bedroom at the house. And this is way before Zoom and things like that. So my employees would come over, we'd have meetings, and still running the company from my house and really from my bed. I'd build a special drafting board and put it on my bed so I could, I could read the plans. And it was really a hard time. But during that season, I felt like I was supposed to read the Bible and read it through every verse. What does it say about business? So I did that. I read the Bible, every word, every verse. What does this say about business? Then I got better. And then the next year I hurt my back again and did the same thing. I read the Bible again, every word. What does the Bible say about business? And there's just so many principles, so many stories, so many analogies from the Bible that we can apply to business. For example, there's a lot of war in the Bible. War is a great analogy for business. Strategize for war. You can strategize for business. You're conquering land, you're defending land, you're fortifying your position, you're thinking through what's the next step. You're building an army, a team, and the other side and what they're doing. And so I took these principles out of the Bible and started applying them to our company and to our team. And it was like God said, oh, you want to do it the way I want you to do it? I'll bless that.
Mm-hmm.
We just saw all kinds of amazing things happen when we tried to follow the principles in the Bible and try and follow what God was telling us to do. It felt like supernatural things that happen all the time, where if your carpet doesn't come in, at the right time. You really can't finish your project on schedule. If your doors, frames, and hardware get delayed, we would have those things happen, but somehow something always happened at the last minute where we got everything done, always on time. We never missed a schedule. There's not one person on the face of the earth who can look me in the eye and say, you told me you would get me in by a certain date and you did not. We never had a reportable injury on a project in the construction industry. Talking about supernatural. And we always made full profit on our projects. 20 years, 2,500 projects. We just tried to do things what we call God's way. We don't have a license on that or anything, but we just tried to follow what we felt were the right things to do based on the Bible, the truths in the Bible, and God just seemed to bless it.
Well, I have to tell you, I think, again, when I heard those numbers, when you and I first started talking about it, I thought those are supernatural. You have to know there's something else leaning into that in order to make it happen, because we start just looking at straight up statistics. The US Bureau of Labor Statistics says that entrepreneurial businesses like yours, they fail. The numbers are stacked against you. One of the types of listeners we have are entrepreneurs, people who are hoping one day to be able to develop themselves. What kind of advice do you give to leaders who are looking at odds that seem to be stacked against them, in which you're trying to encourage them to still step out, do the hard work?
A need is not a call, and a call is not a send. Just because you see a need doesn't mean you're called to do it. But if you are called to do it, maybe you're not supposed to do it today. Maybe you're supposed to be trained.
Right.
You're doing this just because you see a need, because we all see needs. There's multiple needs. There's all kinds of needs out there in the world that could be solved by business products or solved in other ways. But just because you see a need doesn't necessarily mean that you're called to it. But if you do feel called to it, then is it time? Is it time to be sent? And so I see so many people, they see a need, they feel like they're called, and they go send themselves. But really, is God sending you? Are you getting wise counsel? Are they saying it's time to do this? What about your spouses? How do they feel about it? Do they see things in you that maybe need to be trained, things in you that need to be worked out? Because if you don't do those things, you're going to fail in the business world and your company. Get wise counsel. And are you really trained to go run a business? There's so many facets of running a business. The way I like to say it is, just because you're really good at hanging drywall doesn't mean you're supposed to go start a drywall company. And just because you're really good at coding software doesn't mean necessarily you're supposed to go start a software company. A need is not a call is not a send.
I like it. There are so many people who do think, oh, wow, I can work in this particular space. I have this skill. I'm going to go out and hang out a shingle. Well, no, maybe not, because that's only a fraction of what it takes to actually do that for profit as a business person.
And you're competing against people who may be really great at running a company and you're not. And you're probably going to lose when you run up against those people.
Yes, that's true. So how do you continue to teach and share with business leaders today?
I'm writing a book. Don, you know that because you've helped me write it. We're working on that. Looking forward to releasing the book. I sold my company and started a nonprofit, Master Plan Business Ministries, where we have resources for people to really learn how to run their organizations according to biblical truths, the ways of doing things that are time tested over decades and centuries. And then I'm at Gateway Church. I oversee a program where we help train leaders how to run their companies according to biblical principles, but also how to become better fathers, how to become better husbands and wives and better mothers and all, and really how to build relationships and all that. It's kind of a holistic program where people can come and really get the best biblically based resources in different areas of their lives. I love working with business owners and business leaders and helping them move to those next chapters in their lives.
Steve, the premise of this podcast is that a disproportionate number of Fortune 500 executives were actively engaged in sports at both the high school and collegiate level, and that experience helped shape the way they lead today. Do you agree that your history in athletics has helped make you a better leader?
I do. And of course, you don't have to be an athlete to be successful. But when I look at people who've been in athletics, I love to ask them questions because, Don, you and I, we've been in those situations. How do they interact with their teammates? How do they engage in the athletic experience? Did they have a strong work ethic? How did they train? What did they think? How did they strategize? Because all those things you learn really in athletics, did they apply those? And I asked them questions based on their athletic background and how did they win? How did they lose? Who were the people that mentored them and what did they learn? Some of the questions you're asking me, those are incredible questions to ask people because people in athletics have been on a team. They learned to work together as a team. Were they more concerned about the team? Were they willing to do the dirty work? Were they willing to help their teammates? Were they willing to give assists instead of shooting the basketball? Were they willing to rebound and play defense? Was it all about them or was it about the team? So many qualities that we learn in the business world. And are they willing to do that?
Yeah, I mean, I love it because it's that point, right? It's not about sport itself, it's about how you were as an athlete and your character on the field. What an important piece of how we weigh people. Is there a person in your professional life that has served a role like some of those coaches did for you as an athlete that we discussed earlier?
Several people. One of them actually was a coach, one of the most successful coaches ever in Florida, a guy named Tom Mullins. He had some undefeated teams and teams that were ranked some of the best ever in Florida in high school. Went on to become a college coach. He's 75 years old now, but at some point he started a church, one of the largest churches in the United States, runs about 30,000 on the weekend. He's 75 years old now. He's been such an inspiration to me in the area of leadership. I meet with him multiple times a year, but once or twice a year, the whole purpose of the meeting is leadership. And I say, Coach, everybody calls him Coach, even though he's been a pastor for probably 30 years. Coach, coach me up. And he loves to coach up young men. He loves to coach up older men. He just loves to coach. He loves to train. He's written leadership books. He's an amazing man of God. His church has just flourished. Everything he's done has really flourished. And he's been an incredible example in my life as a coach. He was actually a coach in athletics.
Yeah, he actually coached Jackie Nicholas, Jack Nicholas's son.
That's correct.
I had the chance to talk to him while working with Jackie Nicholas on a project. So yes, I mean, I love his stories. He's awesome.
Coaches coached, I think, almost all of Jack Nicholas's children.
Yeah.
Tom Mullins is an amazing guy. And then another close friend of mine is a guy named Tony Jerry. Tony is a coach to Fortune 500 companies. He's one of the best in the world at coaching Fortune 500 executives. It's also funny too, because when you say that, I helped found a Gateway Church. I was the second person at Gateway Church. Senior pastor is my best friend. Gateway Church is like a Fortune 500 church, certainly one of the 10 largest churches in the United States, maybe top 5. We have 35,000 attendees on the weekend before COVID. It's a Fortune 500. It's actually probably a Fortune 50 church. I've been a founding elder, been able to help the church grow. We were 20 years old. All the lessons I learned in athletics, all the lessons I've learned in business apply to the church world as well. So it's been an exciting time these last 20 years to build one of the largest churches in the United States. And then this business leadership program that I do at the church is the largest church-based leadership program in the United States. And so it's like a Fortune 50 company in that it's the largest in the United States. So absolutely, Don, all these lessons that you learn in athletics apply to large organizations. And I'm so grateful for the lessons that I have learned in the sports world.
No question. So many companies, organizations love to toss the word team around, my team or our team. And the truth is, they're not a team. They're just a group of people working for the same organization. As someone that has had the opportunity to both be part of a team and built teams, what are the elements that bridge a collection of individuals and help them become a team? What are the kind of the ways that you define the differences there, and how can we maybe all learn from that and maybe help ourselves build better teams?
When you start talking about teams, there's a shared vision. In sports, the shared vision is to win the district championship or win the national championship or whatever it is, but there's got to be some kind of shared vision for what the team is to accomplish, but also what the team is to become. The Bible talks about when you have a vision, write it down, make it plain so that others may run with it. So this shared vision that's very clear vision that people can run with it. When you talk about building teams, we hire based on character, competency, and culture. So when we look at someone, is their character a fit? Or do they have the right character? Number 2, can they actually do the job? Do they have the abilities to do the job? So we can train them, but they don't have the experience, but do they have the ability? Some people, they don't, they need to be doing a different job or in a different organization. And then culture is a big buzzword today in the business world, but also in the sporting world. But culture is so important. Can you build a culture that everyone knows what the culture is, and do they fit into the culture? I define culture, Don, as the shadow of the leader. And the leader is going to set the culture. Will the people that you're hiring fit into the culture? And once you build the right team, you've got to build great systems and great processes. Just like with coaches, they're building great plays. That's their system, that's their process. And if you don't have great plays, you can have the greatest athletes in the world. It's not going to go well. You know that. You've seen it so many times. And if you don't have a great culture, we see so many teams in the sports world today, their culture is not very good. Maybe it used to be great and they were very successful, but now maybe the head coach left or the owner or whatever, and the culture is just not there. And they just don't seem to succeed. Take the time to hire the right players based on a very clear job description. Just take the time. You see, even in the sports world, when these drafts, I'm thinking of multiple athletes where they didn't have the right character. They were incredibly competent. Because they didn't have the right character, they really didn't fit into the culture. And they ended up bombing out of the league or whatever it might be. So, Don, you get the right team, the right people, right systems and processes. Leadership is really easy at that point, right?
Yeah.
You get the great athletes, the great employees, the great staff, great team, and then you're just kind of leading, providing vision. You've just got to build great systems and great processes. And it just almost runs itself.
Culture is the shadow of the leader. So that at the end of the day, what you really have to be doing is while you're leading, you have to be casting the right shadow. It's pretty powerful.
Exactly. And then even when I think about athletics, I mean, all these teams, you're playing pickup football or pickup basketball, whatever. How do you select the right players? It's kind of like in golf. Sometimes you've won on the first tee, right? You pick the right opponent.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? Or you put them in the right circumstances where, when I get to this hole, they're not going to do well, whatever it is, or under pressure, they're not going to do well. So how do you put pressure on them, right? Going through life and playing sports and picking the right team. Man, you pick the right team, give them the right vision, put them in the right culture, they're going to succeed because there's so few other teams that are going to do that.
Steve Dulin, thank you for being our guest today. Thank you for being a corporate competitor. I am honored to be your friend. I'm honored to be your teammate. And today I'm honored to have been your host.
Don, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. As I said before, I'm just honored to know you. And I love what you're doing. I think it's amazing. You write these articles, you do these podcasts, and you're all about team. God's all about team. God's all about individuals, but he's also about team. And I just really an honor to know you. And thank you so much for having me today.
From an early age, Steve meticulously broke down his opponents in football and basketball, trying to decipher their strategies and determine how he and his team could beat them. This attention to detail carried over to his professional career, where he understands that focused training is what will get you through the hard moments. I love Steve's idea about making practice hard so that the games feel easy. How can you make your training program more robust? Consider writing practice scenarios for your team so they feel more prepared. It is better to mess up in front of your teammates in practice than when the game is on the line. You will feel more comfortable answering questions and defending strategies when everyone has practiced. If you could share one habit, one thing you've done consistently that allowed you to separate yourself from your competitors, what would it be? In my 30-year career, 2,500 of the greatest athletes, coaches, and leaders answered that question for me.
This is Don Yeager, who did that article I was telling you about.
Don, Dave Sims with Coach K. How you doing?
Hey, Don. How you doing, my man? Great, sir.
What they gave to me is what I'm giving to you in my online course, Journey to Greatness. Through engaging storytelling and on-demand videos, you will learn the 16 habits that will jumpstart your personal growth. I will instruct you on how to apply these winning characteristics to your life through custom workbook exercises. We are slashing the price for our podcast listeners. Lifetime access to Journey to Greatness is normally $399, but for our podcast listeners, it will be $49 with the code podcast at checkout. Click the banner on corporatecompetitorpodcast.com to enroll. Thanks for listening to the show. I would be so grateful if you left us a rating and a review. We will be rolling out a new episode every Wednesday. To be the first to listen, subscribe to the podcast on our website, corporatecompetitorpodcast.com. Plus, as a thank you gift, you will receive a free chapter from one of my best-selling books on the habits of high-performing teams. Stay in touch by connecting with me on social media at Don Yeager, Yaeger, on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. Until next week, I appreciate you.